Hey, Peter.
Yep.
What's the prettiest note?
D.
I'm Adam Maness,
And I'm Peter Martin.
and you're listening to the You'll Hear It podcast.
Daily jazz advice coming at you.
Coming at you, and today's episode of the You'll Hear It podcast is sponsored by the Oxford American. The Oxford American is a magazine dedicated to documenting the complexity and vitality of the American South. Its award-winning annual music issue comes with a CD sampler and digital download. It's a must-have for any serious music fan. Recent issues have featured Nina Simone, Thelonious Monk, John Cage, and John Coltrane. Visit oxfordamerican.org/YHI today. That's oxfordamerican.org/YHI. YHI is, and you'll hear it, and you get a great deal with that little code there.
That's right. Jump on that because it's not happening forever.
No.
They are our charter sponsors, and this is a charter offer, my friend.
And they've been awesome. And I've so enjoyed, having the magazine around the office, having it at home, and checking out all the amazing writing about one of the most important cultural touchstones that is so relevant to us and to, I think, our listeners. So it's been awesome.
And Adam, you've been looking smarter. And I just realized I could probably attribute that to your close association with the Oxford American, your reading it, the way you hold your coffee, your whole countenance is...
Pinkies up.
Pinkies up.
Pinkies up.
It's just smarter. And big shout out to Oxford American for sending us these. What happened to your hat? Did you get one too?
I only wear these wool hats.
Waldo hat. Yeah.
But only up until like July or August.
Okay, got it. I'm not really a hat guy, but for the Oxford American today, I definitely am. So
cool.
What are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about something that we call root shell pretty. And
root shell pretty.
And by the way,
yeah.
D, that's a great choice. That is a pretty note.
I mean, you kind of caught me off guard with that question. I'm like, I didn't want to go C because C is so like plain, but I didn't want to be all
Jane
like
C.
B sharp.
Yeah, no. D is a very beautiful note. But root shell pretty. So you wrote a great blog post a couple weeks ago called 5 Easy Jazz Piano Chords That Sound Great. Yeah. Now that is a heck of a title there, buddy.
Well, I don't want to oversell it, but I don't want to undersell
5 easy jazz piano chords that sound great. We're gonna include the link to the blog. It actually is a really good blog. We talk about this concept, root shell pretty. I think we've talked about this concept for years, but you finally named it root shell pretty. And I
thought you named it.
Well, I kind of like solidified that, but you were like, root shell pretty. That's what we're calling it.
Yeah, maybe I came up with that, but you came up with the concept of root. I mean, I'm always talking about root and shell, not just me, obviously, a lot of people, but I kind of said that, well, if we base it on the root shell, and you were like, yeah, and then we add some pretty notes. I was like, oh, snap, there it is.
I didn't invent this by any means. This is used by a lot of jazz pianists, but it's so easy to see a good voicing if you have the root and shell in your left hand and you add some pretty notes in the right hand.
Yeah.
So anyway, we released this blog post. It's been pretty popular so far. It's gotten a lot of traction, and then we got...
And it's on, I don't know if we've talked about this enough or even if we've mentioned it, because it's been a little bit of a soft launch, I would say.
Definitely.
We have a new blog that accompanies the You'll Hear It podcast.
Yeah,
right?
you'llhearit.com is now podcast/blog, and there's honestly way too much good information that we're giving away for free up there. It is so cool to have.
Should we start taking stuff down?
We probably should, or at least like putting up some kind of paywall. Did anybody do that besides the New York Times anymore?
I don't think so.
Because it doesn't work. But anyway, go check it out on our blog. There's so much good stuff, including root shell pretty. That's you'llhearit.com. We'll also include a link here in the description. But we started getting some questions about it to kind of go deeper. So this one is from Mike. And Mike says, hey guys, I'm a saxophonist working on improving my understanding of harmony at the piano. Good on you, Mike.
Yep.
The episodes on voicings have helped me start advancing beyond octaves in the left, root third, fifth, seventh in the right. Boo. But as I try to implement the root shell pretty style, for example, I'm never sure what specific extensions to use. It seems like the shell is almost always strictly defined by the chord, major, minor, dominant. But how should I decide between the flat, natural, sharp 9th, 11th, and or 13th? I'm guessing voice leading has a lot to do with it, but are there any particular rules or guidelines to determine which of those extensions to use and how to alter them? Keep up the great work. Appreciate the lessons and advice. 7 stars. That's an important part of it.
Of course. That's how you get your question on the podcast.
Mike, this is a great question.
Yeah.
We have... First of all, nothing is off limits when it comes to pretty notes or whatever. If you can make it work and it works for...
Oh, yeah, things are off limits. The ugly notes, of course.
But there are some they're not strict guidelines, but there
Right.
are some guidelines, and it usually has to do with what is the quality of the chord.
Yeah.
Right. There are some sort of rules, quote unquote, that are generally followed, or at least help you to get a sound when you don't know what you're doing.
Well,
you
I
know?
think the only really strict rule that doesn't have an exception, at least, is that it sounds good.
That's right.
I mean, and that sounds, obvious, but
Yeah.
for some reason it isn't, because some people approach these kind of basic voicings, I think, a little too theoretically, and a little bit too much from that root position. So you have to understand the concept of the theory of it first and play these things in root position. What happens is you're starting from a place where it's not a very pleasing, jazzy sound. I never thought I would say pleasing, jazzy sound, but now there I said it, But I mean, really just something that sounds good. Something can be simple and basic and sound good.
Yeah.
We're big believers in that. And so I think when we started coming up with this concept, it was, and we're definitely gearing this towards beginners. I think it's really good for reviewing too, and building up some voicings and being able to hear some things.
Good for non-pianists too.
Very good for non-pianists, for you vocalists, for you instrumentalists, for you drummers out there that want to, a little bit of basic piano, but you want to play some stuff that sounds good. That's not, why. And so when we started looking at this other information available on the so-called internet,
So-called
or
internet.
I should say, this so-called
I was
information
going to say,
available.
the internet's pretty well established at this point, bro.
Right. Well, some so-called good information,
Come
which
on.
there was very little. It's always explaining, what these chords are. Like, who cares,
Yeah.
really? I mean, yeah, of course, it's interesting to know that. But we come more from the place of, like, let's give something that's easy, that you can play very much, right from the beginning, that sounds good.
And is useful.
And is useful, right?
And another principle to this, Mike, that I will say that is you always preach this, which I think is very important, is a voicing doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Can I get an amen from,
You know what I
from the
mean?
congregation?
The context of what happened before and what's happening after for
Yeah.
every single voicing is super important.
And we get into that like at the bottom of the blog post. This is very beginner level.
Yeah.
But we did want to hit on that, and so with the little on the how to practice section, we do some kind of voice leading stuff. But I think at the beginning, you're just trying to go for a good chord,
Right.
for each of these
Just-
different types.
Just to get this sound. Well,
Yeah.
let's start with a major chord.
Okay.
So here's an example of how the context matters. If the major chord is a 1 chord,
Yeah.
a good root shell pretty voicing is you have the root and shell in the left hand. That's C, E, and B. And an easy pretty voicing, especially if it's the 1, is D and G. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I like
Now,
it.
But let's say that same chord is in the context in the key of G.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That works
Gotta move
to
my
have
coffee
that
cup over for
to
that
have
one.
that G on top. But instead of having the 5th on top, no, we're going to still say on the C major 7, but now we're in the
Oh.
key of G. So now the C is not a 1, it's a 4.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
You can add very easily the F sharp on top, the sharp 11, right? So go from G to that, from G major 7 to that. Same key sounds really, really good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So having that sharp 11, I mean, you could use it as a tonic chord too, as a 1-2, but
Sure.
it's more in context that sharp 11 fits perfectly as a 4 chord, as that Lydian sound. So that's what I'm talking about, Mike, when I talk about context. And that's
Yeah.
one clue that you could have, that F sharp is in the key of G.
Right.
So if it's a 4 chord in the major 7, feel free to use that sharp 11 most of the time.
Right.
If it's a 1 chord, it's a little trickier, not trickier, but it's more of I'm making a strong decision about
Right.
this.
Maybe the melody or something with the improv, or somebody's playing something that.
Yeah.
So let's
is
go back to what we listed as chord 1, which is actually that one.
Yep.
In the blog post, but major 7th and root, shell,
Yep.
pretty. I think some of the things that we can think about are, if we were to play, I mean, this is basically a C major 9. We put C major 7
Yeah.
because we didn't want to get too fussy about the extensions yet.
Yep.
But if you think about root position, it's a little bit. I mean, it's alright, but do we ever play that?
No, it's
No.
not an interesting voicing.
No. So it's a disinterested voicing, you would
Yeah.
say.
I mean, it's as basic as you can get.
But it's so close to this. In fact, all we're doing is moving
Yeah.
the G up. But
Yeah.
what a different sound, though.
It's completely different.
Yeah. And I think because you've got if you do want to dig into some of the theory, I think it's more useful to think about like why it sounds good. You got this G major triad first inversion at the top of it.
Yeah.
And then you've also got I was going to say 2 fourths, but you only got 1. That's okay. You got a perfect fourth on top, which is fun. But the idea with this is that, you start learning these in different keys maybe.
Yeah.
Is that going to kill them?
No, it's not going to kill them at all. But maybe we should talk about options too. What are usually the pretty notes?
Okay.
You know what I mean? On a major chord?
Well, we didn't give him a lot of options in the blog post.
Well, no, but he's asking for more to go
options.
deeper, right?
Gotcha.
So in general, the pretty notes could be the 5th, the 9th, the 11th, and the 13th.
Yep.
Right? Those are options on every chord, and just the context matters then after that. Flatting and sharpening, whatever. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But I just wanted to make sure that was said. So no matter what you do, if you do root and shell, which is the shell is the 3rd and 7th, root and the 3rd and 7th in the left hand, you can add a combination of any of those voicings.
Yeah.
Or any of those extensions, 5th, 9, 11, or 13.
Yeah, and I think that the biggest thing that gets you away from the very basic, still 5-note voicings is what we're talking about, is the question of if you're going to, like everything that we delineated in this blog post, I believe, is root and shell in the left hand with the root on the bottom.
Yeah.
So it's all within an octave. There's no tenths or anything I don't think we had. No. So that really establishes that all your pretty notes are going to be in the right hand.
That's right.
But if you want to start looking at some things that conceptually are not that much more complicated, just think about the shell being inverted. And even if you're not doing it in one hand, so you're going to go root and shell between the 2 hands. So you got B and E.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could take those same 2 notes you were using, the 5th and the 9th, and put them up. And we're spreading it out more, right?
Yeah.
That's a nice sound, too.
Also,
as opposed to that.
If you thought the 5th was boring, you could do the 13th. So you have a C major 13th with that voice, common voicing.
Yeah. And that's like a 6-9, right?
No, that's a 13th.
That's a 13th? Why?
Because there's the 7th.
Ah, you're right. I was just testing you. You passed. I was testing myself.
I failed.
So if I didn't have the 7th, that would be 6-9.
Exactly.
Really? I never knew that.
Yeah. So you
I literally never do that.
You haven't obviously read my whole blog post available at you'llhear.com on the 6-9 chord.
No, I guess I should.
So the 6-9.
Andrew, make a note for me to read that, please. Thank you.
I'll tell you about it later. 6-9 is used when the melody is usually the root,
right,
and you don't want to have that clash of a 7th somewhere below it.
Okay, perfect example. See, I did not know the theory behind it, but I knew the difference of the sound, and I would use it. So I think that's the important thing. It's fun to know the theory if you want to geek out on that, no problem.
You don't really need it.
But yeah, the main thing is be able to hear the difference and be able to apply them to the correct musical situation.
Minor 7 chords.
Minor 7.
What are our options? What are the contexts?
So that's chord number 2, right?
The major and the minor are actually pretty easy because there's only certain things that sound good.
And we just came up with one because we wanted to simplify things. We love to simplify and isolate here at the You'll Hear podcast here at Open Studio.
It's been a theme from the beginning.
Here in our lives. Yep. With my chores at home, I like to simplify and isolate. I was just telling my wife that. She's like, can you do this, this, and this? I was like, no.
Honey, I have to simplify and isolate. So
isolate one thing for me to do today, okay?
I'm going to take the garbage out and I'm going to go.
Right. Recycling tomorrow. Okay. So for the minor 7th, we could have done really the same thing, just
could have.
Yeah.
Could do.
But we wanted to start to look at some other options. So we went root, shell in the left hand.
Yeah.
C, E flat, B flat in this case. And then the 9th. And then for the top pretty note, we went.
Yeah. 11th.
11th.
Root, shell, pretty. You know what one of my favorite is? Even prettier, add the 13th on top of that.
Oh, come on. Is that even legal?
Ooh, that's pretty.
That's pretty. So here I think you really start to hear that B flat major triad because it's root position. And we were dogging out, root position, major 7th. But when you have them stacked on top, what is that? Different context. What did Jeff Keyser? Funky stacks of hipness?
That's right. That's exactly what that is. Yeah.
This is a basic version of that.
That's good. Okay, so now we're on to dominant chords. Now, options abound.
Yes. And why is that?
Because dominant chords are there to create tension.
Exactly. And so the way that one way that you can add tension, well, there's an inherent tension to them because they're unstable, wanting to kind of move somewhere, usually, except for maybe in the blues context. But the way to add tension is by adding alterations.
That's right. So
because they feel like they want to lead somewhere.
I'm glad you brought up the blues context.
Yeah.
So in general, Mike, in a blues context, if you're playing a B flat blues, you're not going to go in with the first chord B flat 7 flat 9.
No,
that's not happening. You can make that work, but it's
my mama done told me
not going to happen.
No, not
you want to
good.
just do a straight 7 9 13 situation.
Now here we can get away with a little more root position, Bob, huh? except not on the key station.
But play
49.
a B flat. Play B flat 713. Right?
A little hipper.
Little hipper.
Man, it's hard to make the key station sound.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
But okay, so that's if it's a 1 chord. Now, what if the dominant chord is a 5 chord, which is what they're most often used as?
Right. So they want to go somewhere. Now we get to like chord 4.
Yeah.
For instance, dominant 7th with the sharp 11.
Right. Man, I love a dominant 7 with a sharp 11.
And where does that want to go? Or
Yeah. Can be used as a dominant chord.
Yep.
Can be used also as a tonic chord. Can be used as a Lydian dominant, like a 4.
Yeah.
7.
Another thing is like they don't have to always resolve to the 1 as a 5. They can resolve to something with a little less tension.
Yeah.
Maybe on a blues,
There are also like a 2 chord. Like if you're in the key
Sub
of
in the tube. Yeah.
A flat, right? And you do the 5 of 5. Instead of a B flat minor 7, you can do a B flat 7 sharp 11. It sounds great. Okay, so one rule as far as flat 9 sharp 9 goes, I think flat 9s are used more, and this is not hard and fast, but flat 9 is used more going towards
Isn't a rule hard and fast by its very nature?
No.
Okay,
but in general,
okay.
the flat 9 sound can go to, and this is like a half whole diminished sound. The flat 9 sound goes to a major chord.
Yeah.
Right? And that sharp 9 flat 13, that altered sound goes more towards a minor chord.
Right.
Because it's more common tones.
Yep.
So and again, you can do either to both because it's fine, but in general.
Yeah.
Like if I see a B flat 7 flat 9, like B flat 13 flat 9, so I know there's a G in there, that implies major, E flat major.
Because it's already at the major.
Right. Now if I see a B flat altered or B flat sharp 9 flat 13, because of that G flat and that D flat, that implies E flat minor.
Like how I'm playing the notes as you say them.
I appreciate that. But you know what I mean? That implies that we're going somewhere else.
When I think that perhaps you could think about one way to look at the exceptions to this rule would be when you don't want it to sound as expected. So we're talking about situations where, like what you just referred to as kind of a natural, and maybe it keeps moving, but sometimes you want it to be. Whoa. But if you do that all the time, it just sounds ridiculous.
But I'm saying just in general, those are the two kind of guidelines that people often use. So again, for a dominant 7, if it's a flat 9, major 13 kind of situation, right, it's usually going to a major. Usually, if it's like an altered sound, it's used a lot in minor. So if you wanted to write, if you're playing a tune like Softly as in the Morning Sunrise, playing a D half diminished to a G13 flat 9, with the E, it's not as common.
Yeah.
Going back to a C minor.
That would add in a different kind of tension, almost like a angular kind of.
Because you're adding that
grading.
Major third to the situation, right? In the key of C minor, you're adding an E.
Yeah, exactly. And you just want to be, and it would be the same thing if you went to the 2.
Right. Exactly. If you went to a Dorian sound on the D, it'd be the same kind of thing. Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, so thank you for the question, Mike, right? Was that Mike?
That was Mike.
Mike.
Hey, good job on the M audio today, man.
Man, you know what? These little keys feel like
crap.
Crizzap, but we do what we can. Check out the blog post at you'llhear.com. I just remember we actually did a little video on this. 5 Easy Jazz. That's getting a little noise over on the YouTube. So there's a link. Well, there's an embed.
It's picking up traction. We're going to put a link to that. Andrew, put a link to the 6/9 chord and just mail it to Peter.
Yeah. And just, exactly, please. And then, that's a joke. But the thing about this, too, is...
No, it's not.
5 Easy Jazz piano chords that sound great. The idea with this was that we would... we're really trying, to be honest, counteract some of the garbage that's out here when people go to look for basic jazz piano chords.
Man,
and all they give them is...
Stuff for beginners is so shoddy. Like, you don't have to be just starting out learning this and learn the crappy way of things.
I know. Our thing is like we want to meet you at the level you're at, but this stuff does not need to be that hard.
Yeah.
You're not gonna be. We can't teach you how to play like Herbie Hancock today, but we can teach you. I mean, Herbie Hancock plays this. He just goes and plays a bunch of other stuff too. But I mean, Herbie Hancock does not play this. Keith Jarrett does. Sorry.
Herbie could play that. Would sound amazing. He'd figure out a way. Yeah. All right. For a limited time, You'll Hear It listeners can subscribe to the Oxford American for only $25. Visit oxfordamerican.org/YHI to subscribe today. $25 is
That's
really
a good deal.
That's a yearly subscription.
I mean, we buy books for $25, and each one of those these quarterly beautiful magazines is a book unto its own, and it's like $18 at the airport.
Right.
I've bought plus tax.
Right.
Plus tax.
You get all 4.
Is this 25 plus
for the
tax?
year.
No,
Beautiful
I think it's
photography.
Yeah, including shipping.
Including shipping.
Including shipping.
Yeah. So again, go to oxfordamerican.org/YHI for that deal.
And look, oxfordamerican.org, that tells you a lot. You don't just get to be an ORG just because you want to. Believe me, we tried. They didn't let us.
Also, we have a outro music today from Jim Reid. It's his version of Baya. If you want to hear your music on the You'll Hear It podcast, send your track to andrew@openstudionetwork.org.
No, it's not. See, we weren't allowed to do that. Is this
Let's find out.
All right,
Andrew, give it a go.
You'll Hear It.